So I guess we can get into this now. First, I really just want to know a little bit about what you do in your current job or jobs as a tech entrepreneur, and what you think about your whole experience that you're going through there.
Well, really, this is not by design or as a career goal. Um, I've had two successful careers. One as a trading systems developer, basically a programmer that wrote trading systems. And then I did that for like 10 years. And then I had a chance to trade and use those systems. So I was a head trader at various firms for about 15 years. Then I retired, and I thought I was going to go back, into finance maybe, after a year or two, but that never happened. And that was about 7 years ago. What happened in between is that I started realizing that, especially with my tech background, that a lot of stuff in computers isn't really exactly the way it should work. But I didn't know what I really wanted and how I thought it should work. But it was very frustrating that, after having used computers for most of my adult life since I was 14, when you look under the covers, not much really has changed. We have fancy devices with very slick graphics, a lot of sound, a lot of visuals, but underneath it, it's like 30, 40-year-old technology. And that was very frustrating and disappointing to see because we've never had that many programmers in the history of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the best that we can do, and that was my problem. So that kind of frustration and realization that, underneath it all, nothing has changed, really bugged me. And then probably, I would say a good 6 or 7 months down the road, it bugged me to the point where I thought it was just going to bug me and leave me alone so that I could just forget about it. But it kept gnawing at me, and until I started asking questions. And because of my tech background, I knew how to research. Because this is computer related, most of the information for computer related stuff is on the internet. So that's one good, fortunate thing that's happened with the web and, advances thereof and information retrieval. So I'm able to quickly catch up, research what I needed to do, and started realizing what my solution, how I would like the things to work.
So you got a lot of experience in tech, and then that experience kind of opened up your eyes to a lot of problems that you then began forming a solution to.
Right, and that's the heart of entrepreneurship is that you're usually um, seeing very successful entrepreneurs are the ones who notice problems in things that are taken for granted and things that are taken as normal. And then what they do is they take that knowledge, they see a better way to do it, and then they provide a better solution, which is
Hmm.
a better product.
Okay, and so what exactly did your solution look like in general terms?
So what we decided to do was I went in search of data models to use to solve some of these issues that I've noticed. And there's a lot of these problems. And this discussion would be too long to go over even a few of them. But let's say I looked at a lot of data models, couldn't find any that satisfied my problem set until I started looking at ourselves in mainly in how DNA works. right?
That's interesting.
So so think about DNA, the thing that basically is every one of our cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it data? Is DNA data?
To a degree, yes.
It's absolutely data,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's made out of these four little ACTG, right? And then it's a sequence of it.
Yeah.
So it is data. Does DNA manage its data?
Yes.
Yes. And if it's data and it manages data, it's called a data model.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking at it and started realizing that every data model has um, some assumptions, and they have reasons for why it's structured in the way it is. And I started looking into it to figure out what could I learn from it, not to replicate it, but to learn the principles of how DNA actually manages itself and what's the mechanisms that it's put into place to make it happen. And I learned a lot of things. It's actually quite surprising. And so that's what NUTS Technologies is all about. NUTS stands for Encrypted User Data Transit and Storage. We use a little e and then capitalize the N in encrypted. But basically, it's a set of technologies that are tightly integrated, and we call ourselves a data-centric technology, meaning that the conventional methods of solving problems in the digital arena today is if you have a problem, I am going to write an application to solve it. That is called application-centric thinking. And that's what I learned all my life, right? Is everything, you have a problem, you solve it with an application. Um, we actually found that if the data is structured correctly or in a different way, it's organized, you could actually solve problems and significant problems by using data. And so we call it data-centric design. And it's a very, very different way to look at the world of data and computation. And I think there's room for both. I think they have to coexist. But our view of the world, I don't think it really exists.
Yeah, I mean that's really, where the innovation and the progress comes from. I feel like, sometimes you need to take these you need to make these fundamental shifts in, the way you view certain things and the way you solve problems, and I think you're definitely contributing to that.
Well, so the main idea behind our approach is this. Right now, in computer science and in any digital device, if you have a copy of my data, it's just as good as the original, and you can do whatever you want with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in that way, imagine putting yourself into data's shoes. And I know I'm asking you to
Yeah,
do something really weird, right? But think about it. What if you are that little piece of data? How would you feel?
I couldn't answer that. I'm not sure, but one thing
Right.
is
So there you go.
yeah,
That's a very different view, right?
yeah, it's hard to kind of put
And
yourself in that kind of perspective.
well, what it means is that if if just by having physical control over data, it's just as good as your own and you could do whatever you want with it, how do you put a stop to that? The way you put a stop to that is by giving data defensive mechanisms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that we know how to do that, because data is inanimate, is cryptography. And cryptography is very hard to manage. And therein lies the hard problems, is how do you manage cryptography in order to give data this posture, this defensive posture. Um,
Yeah.
if you want to find out more about it, we actually did a little seminar for Purdue University in October, and they put us up on their website. So if you look for Nuts Technologies in Purdue, you'll see it under their Cereas series, CERIAS.
Okay.
And they put up like a full hour of me explaining in at a high level two parts of this technology, which should give you at least a good introduction to how we think about this. And it is very different. It's like I've never learned this. I've had to kind of figure it out, and that's why it's taken me 7 years to kind of learn to think this way.
Moving on. So, currently, like, what does your workday look like as an entrepreneur, and how do you think it's different from a lot of people who are just working in tech as a regular employee?
It's very different because I'm actually juggling between the needs of the startup as a corporation, and then also trying to put on all the hats: marketing, business plans, strategizing. If I have to do presentations, I have to prepare that. Um, there's always ups and downs, but it depends on what type of down it is, right? So um, if it's a down that's like serious and material, that has something to do with the premise of your business, that's a real downer. We haven't had that yet. Um, if it's a downer that's based upon other people's opinion of what you're doing, that's a consistent, it's persistent and it's consistent. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to have thick skin.
For sure, yeah, I totally agree.
Otherwise, it isn't for you, because you will be dissuaded. You'll be, asked, why are you doing this? It's a waste of time. You'll be asked, I don't even know what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Why would anybody buy it? So you have to be prepared for that kind of criticism. And the hardest thing is to realize when that criticism is actually constructive
Yeah, I was just
and
about to
when that
ask that.
criticism is nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure, yeah. Like it's very hard to tell because when you're getting so much criticism and so much opinion and so much feedback, it can be hard to like get drowned in all the to not get drowned in all the noise and to filter it out and find a clear path. So, what are some ways that you do that?
Study history, read a lot about these past companies and what happened to them, right? So don't read about the successful companies. Read about the ones that used to be successful and what happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, for
Because you
sure.
don't want to study only it's called survivorship bias in statistics, is that you don't want to just study Apple. You don't want to just study Google. The number of corporations that don't exist today, or they exist in a very diminished form, those are the ones that you want to study.
If I say if like putting myself in your shoes, if I was in that situation where I was going into this unexplored territory. Definitely, there's an element of, and I've experienced this before, where it's like it's very easy to almost how do I say this? Like mistake motion for progress, right? So when you get to those types of points where you don't really have any other examples to go off of, and it's very innovative and never been done before, then when you put in your best and you put in your 100% effort, how do you know that what you're doing is taking you forward and taking you closer to whatever your goal is when there's no other other example of that working out?
So there's many different ways that you got to check yourself, and that is constant surveillance for your competition, constant research for anything that. So if you're trying to solve a problem that very few people are working on, let's say only 5 other people in the world are working on it,
Mm-hmm.
Do you even know what they're calling it? You may have five different ways of describing it, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the problems with new things is not how it works. It's also how does other people describe it so that you know that you're working on the same problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of search terms do you use? These are all issues, right? So, in order to minimize those things, you got to constantly search things. You got to constantly try different search terms, different terms you may be hearing that you know may catch your eye, saying, "I never heard that term, but what does that mean?" Um, you know, it may be a whole set of ideas that you may not know has already been called by something very, and that you had to be in that particularly narrow field to have heard about it.
It's a very interesting approach, but I think it definitely um, is very compelling, right? Like, if nothing else, then just make sure the knowledge that you have and the understanding that you have of what you're getting into, even if you don't have 100%, making sure that it's as thorough as possible. And as you said, if five other people are working on it, figure figure out what they're doing, gain the knowledge that they've gained, and then use that to guide yourself and check yourself. So was the journey of starting and growing and developing this company a rocky road, or was it more of a smooth road? And were there any times that you were pressured to quit?
Fortunately, I think I was, because of my previous careers, I didn't have a pressure to quit. It was really at my own pleasure. And sometimes I wish that I was more pressured by, you know, so that I would have a more urgent need to get it done. Not that I don't. It's just I think certain types of urgencies are healthy. Um, but no, I mean I think the rocky road here is that I didn't even know that the stuff that I was working on was this different. And to this day, I'm kind of still puzzled by that because I'm like, what got into me in the first place to think this way? And then how did it come to be that it actually works?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a weird thing. I know that this is not your typical entrepreneur type of project because many entrepreneurs, actually the vast majority, are incrementalists. So they will tackle a current set of solutions and then make it incrementally better by one or two steps. Very few projects and entrepreneurial endeavors will do um, fundamental research to change a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Is there any specific example that sticks out to you of a company that's a larger, more successful company that has a similar beginning where it's not so much of an incremental improvement and it's more of a completely new approach that ended up being very revolutionary? Is there any specific example that sticks out?
Well, you could take a look at the story of the relational database. So basically, the product itself would be called like an SQL server, right?
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Wouldn't really
In
know.
the industry, the biggest company with relational database is going to be Oracle and then Microsoft,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But neither of those companies invented relational database. Do you know who invented relational databases?
Nope.
IBM.
Mm.
They basically threw it
Okay.
away.
Oh
And
really?
Larry Ellison from Oracle picked it up and said, "Hey, great idea. I'll create a company around it." And he beat IBM to market with their own invention.
Wow. That's insane. How
Right.
do how do these
Hmm?
how do these companies like what's the difference between the people who were looking at this idea at IBM who were like, oh, let's just throw it off without even trying, versus the people at Oracle who say let's build a whole business around this. Is one side so non-committal and the other side deciding to go all out?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And there's entire books written on it. And there's experts at every business school who study that stuff. But I think what you could say is that companies get old. Companies are like people. They start fresh, young, and eager. Then they get into kind of a middle age, and then they get into old age. Now, it's very rare that a company survives through old age and then renews itself. And in fact, they've done studies on the S&P 500 that if you go back 20 years, a significant percentage of those companies didn't even exist, right? So a renewal of a company's culture to innovate and consistently innovate is a remarkable thing to see. It rarely happens. What happens is that they keep buying other little companies that keep innovating, and they'll just keep buying into and merging into new businesses or newer technologies. And that's why there's always room for innovators and entrepreneurs to produce independent innovations, because these larger, successful, older companies will be out to acquire them.
For sure, yeah. I mean that definitely makes sense. I've heard of a lot of companies getting acquired by these massive companies, and I feel like that's definitely tied to some degree to those older companies trying to renew themselves and trying to find, the new innovation and invest in that. So
Right.
given that, moving on to the next point. Obviously, STEM related careers and just any STEM field today is very different than it was, say, 15, 20 years ago, at least I feel like. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you have, especially in tech, uh, in the computer area, you have unbelievable competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that we've never had so many programmers around the world.
Yeah.
So you're going to be competing against the entire globe of programmers, which is literally millions and millions of people, right?
Yep.
Um, so if you take a look, there's almost no barrier to, let's say, computer science technology, right? Almost no barriers. If you want to be a programmer, there's almost no barriers. You could actually teach yourself most programming techniques for free as long as you have an internet connection and a computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the software is out there for free. Most of the toolkits are out there for free, and they're usually open source. And you just need to get some textbooks, learn it, read it, ask people, and you'll do it. So you want to be very careful why you want to get into tech, because unfortunately, tech has an age bias, right? So unless you're successful, the older you are in tech, you're going to find it harder and harder to get a job. That's just a simple truth. You either end up being a tech manager, or you're just going to get replaced by a younger, hungrier programmer, right? The careers that doesn't happen to would be stuff like medical doctors and lawyers, where the older you are, the more experienced you are, a tendency to be more valued. In tech, it's kind of, because of the masses, it's a very, very competitive environment. Mm-hmm. And so you gotta really love what you're doing in tech to continue that way. And if you have that passion and you have that curiosity, and it gives you a sense of fulfillment, then go for it. Because I think you're going to be able to do something wonderful with it.
Mm-hmm. So in that kind of hyper competitive environment where there's there's so many different things you could do, but there's also, people your age, older than you, younger than you, who are also, hungry and competing. What do you think are some ways that you can gain an edge and you can really succeed in these environments?
Um, I think gaining an edge is that you have to be very, very well aware of the competition and the field that you're going into. And then, even if it's a new field, you got to be very quick to study it and know as much as you can about it. Um, everything is there to minimize the risk, right? And then you have to figure out and have a very serious look at what you're trying to do against that competition, and why would somebody even try that product and even buy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's many reasons. Like what's curious is that sometimes the best solutions are not the most successful solutions, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this thing called marketing, and somebody who markets better with an inferior solution could actually make a lot more money. So it's not all about tech. There's a huge mixture of marketing, emotional bias, perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's much more complicated than just a straightforward answer.
Yeah, fair.
And then
Fair
you
enough.
have to the number one thing is nothing in the tech world really gets done alone. So you have to know what your limitations are and get a team together that could help you.
A lot of high school and college students interested in tech as well as interested in business will see this. So, as a kind of concluding thing, is there any particular advice that comes to mind that you'd want them to know about careers in tech, or just life in general, or whatever you want to leave them with?
Okay. So I don't know. I guess I told this to a lot of people, and some of them have told me that I'm the first one to tell them this. But anyway, my favorite saying is statistics is fun and games until it's your turn, right? So everybody loves statistics. Everybody loves to be authoritative on using statistics to justify decisions, but nobody likes to be the statistic.
Yeah, like, definitely I see it a lot in sports where it's like people analyze all of the stats of the players and they analyze all of their past things and use that to decide who's going to win. But, if you were that player and then you get on the basketball court or you get on the football field, all the statistics doesn't matter. All of the speculation doesn't matter because it's your
Well,
turn.
right. So it happens. You could ask your parents, right? Um, when it comes to your kids, everything changes, right?
Hmm.
Because to any parent, your kids are not a statistic, right? So there's a lot of things in life that you got to be able to put yourself into both shoes, right?
Yeah.
As the people who like to run things by statistics, and when you become the statistic, it's two different sides of the equation, but I think it's very important that you're aware of it.
For sure. I think that's a very insightful idea and something that, a lot of people definitely would benefit from taking to heart about looking at it from both sides instead of just looking at your own subjective situation
Hey,
and
think think
story as
about
yeah.
think about the cancer doctor who's a specialist in his field,
Hmm.
right? And his every day he spends his life telling people the statistics of their survivability, right?
Yeah.
Of hey, you got 6 months, you got 2 years, you got 30 days, until he becomes a cancer patient. Then things change quite a bit. It's not to solve anything. It's just
Yeah, it's
to
food for
make
thought.
people
Yeah, it's
aware
food for
of
thought.
you know that there's two sides to things, right?
Hmm. Okay, well, thank you for taking the time to do this interview. It was great. I think we got a lot
No,
of
it's my
great things out
pleasure.
of this.
I appreciated you, you taking a proactive approach. I applaud you for it. And, very good questions. And,
Yeah, thanks.
I wish you all the success.
Yeah, for sure. Good luck for the future too with your company. Um, it's definitely very inspiring to see that kind of innovation, happening right in front of my eyes, and just speaking to the person behind it. And I'm sure everyone who watches this will appreciate that as well. But yeah, thank you. Um, this was definitely really great and really valuable. And yeah, have a nice day.
Yep. All right. Night. Pleasure talking to you.
Yep. Bye.